You are now listening to the Hunter's Advantage podcast. We preserve the history and sport of hunting through curious conversation and action-packed hunts, as well as offering you tips and strategy for more successful hunts. The Hunter's Advantage podcast is powered by Out on a Limb Manufacturing. Out on a Limb is a family-owned company based right here in Oklahoma that makes tree stands, saddle platforms, climbing sticks, and so much more.
Christian, I have a quick question.
What's that?
What bites down harder, a hippo or an alligator?
No idea.
It's a trick question. The Ridge Runner 2.0 bites harder than both of them. But all jokes aside, we use these products all across the land on public or private. These help us get into any tree we want and hunt where the deer actually are.
Most men go to the grocery store for their meat, but these products help you go to God's grocery store. I have used the Out on a Limb Ridge Runner 2.0 and the Shakar sticks for the last few years hunting public land bucks, and I've actually shot several bucks out of this setup. If you want to support the podcast and get some Out on a Limb equipment, make sure to go to outonalimbmfg.com and use code HNTA10 for 10% off at checkout. Once again, if you want to support the podcast, go to outonalimbmfg.com and use code HNTA10 at checkout for 10% off. Now let's get back to the podcast. Well, hey everybody. Today we're doing something a little bit different on the podcast. We're going to do a spotlight session, I guess you could call it, about a big buck that my buddy Ben here shot earlier this October. Just like Kreg was saying, a lot of people across the state in Oklahoma have had a really good fall so far. Kreg, you might have heard him on the podcast recently with the Oklahoma Bow Hunter. He runs that page, and he was on, what was it, a couple months ago? It wasn't too long ago.
It was in August, yeah. Yeah,
back in August. So there's a little bit of backstory of how you two kind of got linked up. And Ben, you said before you guys haven't met in person yet, but you got linked up after the podcast. So maybe Kreg, briefly give a background into kind of how you and Ben got hooked up, and then we'll talk about a little bit about this buck that he shot.
Sounds good. Yeah, so 2 days after our podcast, I shared it on social media. Ben reached out and said he had a few questions about the podcast. So I direct messaged him and gave him my cell phone number, and he had some really good questions. A lot of it had to do with acquiring properties, how you get the landowners' phone numbers. Ben has hunted urban areas before, but had just recently lost some of his best locations in the town that he lives in. So I think we just kind of hit it off pretty well, and kind of told him some of my strategies on kind of how to approach landowners through relationships, and I'll let him tell the rest.
All right, Ben, take it from there. So you took some of this advice, and were you able to apply it pretty quick?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I think it was like a week after we got off the phone. I was just calling and door knocking. It's really funny. So prior to season, I had 2 8-acre patches in the middle of the town I hunt. And I mean, in the middle of the town I hunt. Mm-hmm. And I've killed a couple decent bucks out of there the last couple of years. 10 days prior to season opening, I called the landowner because I'd already been out there, cleared a couple spots, reset a stand. And I called the landowner. I was like, yeah, I have a habit of calling them usually in like August, making sure, or, July, if it's okay if I hunt that again. It's good practice. Just call him and say, hey, can I hunt again? He said, all right. And I kind of forgot to call him. And so I called him and I was like, hey, is it okay if I still hunt out there this year? I was like, I've been out there. It looks really good. He was like, oh man, I forgot to tell you, I just sold all the land by eminent domain to the city. And I was like, what? Like, this is 10 days prior to season. And I already had cams out there, 3 tree stands, and a couple blinds. And I was like, this is a big problem. And he was like, yeah, man, I'm so sorry. I was like, well, do you have any other place I can hunt? And he was like, no, I don't. So yeah, I started talking to Greg, and the long story of this specific buck that I killed, this piece of property, there's a town I go to in Kansas. I've been going there since I was like 12, and I hunt mostly pheasant, occasionally whitetail, but mostly pheasant and quail. And the landowner lives there. And it's in my town in Oklahoma, which they're not close to each other either. So I was like, I know that name. Like I know I've heard of this individual's name up there, and so I start making phone calls to people up there that I know, farmers up there, and me and my dad are calling, kind of asking around, and no one knows who this lady is. It's a lady, and I'm like, how do I know this name? So finally, I go through like every directory possible over like 3 days, trying to find get this lady's phone number, get her phone number, and she goes, um, "You're lucky." And the first thing I say, "Hi, my name," and the first thing she says is, "You're lucky I answered the phone. I never answer the phone if I don't know the phone number." I was like, "Okay, this conversation's starting off with a bang."
Mhm.
So and I'm a very cut to the chase person. So I was like, "Hey, ma'am, I'm such and such. I live such and such. This is my occupation. Can I bow hunt your property?" And she was like, "Well, I don't know. Let's talk about it." So we talked for 2 hours, and this is a older lady, like she's retired. And so we talked for 2 hours about deer hunting. That's all we did. Just talked about managing population, why it's good to hunt them in urban areas, why it's not. You know, talked about that piece of property, other pieces of property. She asked me if people I knew up there, and I said some names I knew, and she was like, "Oh, I'm familiar with them. They're farmers next to me." Da 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 da. We talked for 2 hours, and then she was like, "Well, I don't know. I'll have to think about it." And this is like 5 days now before season, so I'm like, okay, I'm starting to sweat a little bit here. Like I don't have a place to hunt, and where I live, I actually do hunt my backyard. It's 2 acres, but it's not really hunting, if that makes sense. I watch a lot of deer in my backyard, and every now and then I'll take a doe. I have a stand back there that I just mostly sit in.
Mhm.
So I was like, crap, I'm gonna have to hunt my 2 acres or public land in Oklahoma. This is not gonna be fun. A couple days go by, she was supposed to call me, she didn't call me, and I'm getting real nervous. And it's like, I think it is the Friday before season started on Sunday. She calls me at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. "Hey, I thought about it. I'll let you hunt it." She was like, "But you can only take 2 deer off of it." I'm like, "Perfect. Thank you so much. Like, awesome." I actually call my boss at work and say, "Hey, I'm going home." And he's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "I had some stuff come up. I need to take some sick time." So I put in my stuff. I drive straight out to this property, do one loop, and it's about 20 acres ish. I do one loop around it and realize it's practically unhuntable for not setting stuff up early in the season. It's like, well, it's real thick. It's just you can only access it from one direction. And I don't know if you want to get into like all that nitty gritty of how I hunt, but it wasn't super conducive to the way I hunt. And
Mhm.
I'm kind of freaking out now. And so I actually sent Kreg the next day. I was like, "Hey, dude, here's the screenshots. What do you think?" Because I don't see how I could feasibly hunt this without screwing it up because it's only 20 acres. I was like, I have no idea what's there, but it's the only piece of land I do have to hunt. And me and him were on the same page of where it would have been a good idea to start, kind of edge hunting, like just pushing in from the outside. And like where he kind of said this is probably where I would start is like 50 feet, 100 yards maybe from where I was thinking about starting, and I had already set up something too. So that's the skinny of how I got the property. Long story short, for the hunting part, that Saturday or that Friday I went out there. I cut in 2 spots for tree stands and threw up a blind on a spot I kind of liked over a post oak flat, and dumped a shit ton of corn in one pile or one corner of it, and put up a cam. I was like, I gotta see what's there. And like 48 hours later, this big boy showed up, and I was like, okay, game on. I mean,
And did you send some of those pictures to Craig?
yeah, yeah, he has some of them.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
awesome. Okay.
yeah, it was. It's the biggest urban deer I've seen that you could hunt in Oklahoma. There's some really big ones in like Tulsa area, Broken Arrow area. You're from Oklahoma, right?
I'm from Veneta, yeah.
Okay, I'm from Wausau, so not super. My stepmom's
Yeah.
actually from Veneta. So like you're familiar with Tulsa then.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
in Tulsa there are some monster deer. Just no one can hunt them because Tulsa City doesn't let you hunt. So in terms of places that I've seen real urban area, he's one of the biggest deer I've ever seen that somebody could put eyes on in Oklahoma. Like I actually have him in the garage. But yeah, I sent the pictures to Craig and I was like, I got like 6 days to kill this deer and everything's gonna change. And he was like, well, get after it. So
Yeah, that's awesome. So describe the deer a little bit. Like, you get the trail cam pictures for someone that's listening and not watching. Obviously, you don't have the skull with you right now. What does this deer look like? Like, I looked at him on your Facebook and he's an absolute beast. But describing to someone that's just listening.
Oh man, that'd be hard. I'm not very good at that. So let me tell you a little bit about his body first, because that's the crazy thing. The antlers are great, but his body's what's wild. So for anybody listening, especially if it's people not in Oklahoma, whitetails in like not Western Oklahoma, generally speaking, don't get big body deer. It's not like Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska, or like out in Enid. They just don't, from my experience, they don't just get these huge necks, huge body. This dude was every bit of 200 pounds in a urban area with the only thing to eat around him were people throwing corn out for him and acorns. That was it. No wheat farms around, no ag within miles of where he's at, or well within probably 10 miles. There's no kind of ag whatsoever. So instantly seeing him, just his body, I was like, how is that deer that big? That does not compute to the area of where he's at. Especially, I've been hunting the last 3 years, like 5 miles to the south of this spot, and I think the biggest body buck I killed out there was like maybe 145, 150. In terms of like body weight, they just don't get big. They don't have the resources like they do out west. So that threw me for a loop. And in addition to that, he had a fatty tumor on his back left. No, it was back right. His back right hip. And it was actually hanging off of his hip. And I didn't notice it at first. I had these trail cam video pictures, and my dad picked it up. He was like, dude, what's that hanging off the side? I was like, oh, he must have been hit or it's a cancer or something like that had caused it. So his antlers mimicked that. He had, I'm using my hands, and if somebody's listening, they can't see it, but he had his left came out real wide and kind of hooked in, or not hooked in, it just came out real wide and didn't come in very tight. His opposite side was perfect, but he had all kinds of stickers on like right outside of his below his brow tines, right where it comes out of the skull. He had all these stickers just coming out like crazy. He had a lot of purling, or some people call it knurling. He had a bunch of that. Like, I mean, you could rub your finger on it, and I mean, it was just more than I've seen in a whitetail. Just every little bump and cherry on his, his base of his brows. He had a couple of kickers that were broke off already. I mean, his base, I didn't measure it myself, but it was inch and a half, maybe 2. Just super thick, and some really crazy palmation on his side that wasn't the non-typical side, more the typical side. Some serious palmation, not serious palmation, but good palmation coming out of his G1s through G4s. He was a really cool buck, and what was impressive was how wide he was, because he came out, not curled in like I generally see around here. And he's just a really cool deer. Yeah, probably. I think it's going to be really, really difficult for me to beat that in Oklahoma, or beat the fact of how everything came together on that deer.
Yeah, and is he a mainframe 9-point, or is he an 8, or is that one a non-typical point coming out on that?
So it depends on how you count it.
Yeah,
the taxidermist, we both agreed he was a mainframe 9. There's a biologist I know relatively well, friends with. He counted him as a mainframe 11 with the kickers. So it depends on how you want to look at it. If you count everything old school, so if you count everything where you put a ring on, he has 21. I've been counting it at 12. So
okay,
because there's just so many little like he has one that comes right out that's like this long, but it's not on any G's. But then on a couple of his G's, he actually has some in the back that kick kind of up and back out, and they're like, finger size, like maybe like half your finger size. So it just kind of depends on how you want to count it. I would say he's just mainframe 9, but you can maybe count some of those smaller kickers.
So you go from, you lose your good permission. You have the emotion of that. You come back, you get a good piece of permission, but it looks pretty unhuntable. You hook up with Kreg, and you guys kind of figure out how to hunt this. How does the hunt actually come together? From you got the trail cam picture of him, you take a sick day at work, and then how does it actually transpire? How does the hunt happen? I've been using the new Exodus Rival cell camera for the last couple months, and I have found a beautiful mainframe 8-point with tons of stickers to go after this fall.
Ooh.
One thing I do appreciate about Exodus trail cameras is all of the cameras share the same data plan, so you only pay for what you need. A lot of cell cam companies charge you for HD pictures. I've seen prices of $5 for 50 HD pics. Exodus is going to give you unlimited HD pictures right to your phone, which is awesome when you're sitting there in the middle of the summer and it's 100 degrees and you just want to binge a bunch of trail cam photos.
If you're looking for a solid cell camera with great performance and a 5-year no BS warranty, go check them out. So as we all know, hunting gear is something people can make way too complicated. Arrows can be the exact same way. Instead of going down all those rabbit holes trying to sift through the endless information that's online and you're not really sure if it's right or wrong, Exodus makes it simple to get the right arrow for your exact setup.
So go online to the Exodus Arrow Builder. It takes less than a minute. You're going to enter your draw weight, your draw length, and how heavy of a point you're shooting. And it's going to be that simple. Let the guys at Exodus take care of the rest.
So if you're interested in Exodus rival cell cameras or a new set of their MMT arrows, just go to ExodusOutdoorGear.com and use code HA15 for 15% off anything on their website.
Once again, that is ExodusOutdoorGear.com. Use code HA15 at checkout for 15% off. Now let's get back to the podcast.
How to explain that? So I'm gonna give you a little backstory on the property, because that will help, I think, explain this. So, and I don't. Do you live in Veneta right now, or
No, I live in Texas right now.
Oh,
Yep.
am I allowed to swear?
Yeah, you can swear.
I've been trying not to because
Yeah.
my kid's around now, and so I've been really trying to break that habit. But
I
occasionally,
mean,
it'll
just
come out.
nothing wouldn't say in front of your kid, but yeah, go ahead.
I'm prior military. I don't know about that.
That's funny.
So, in this part of Oklahoma, from my experience, I haven't lived in central Oklahoma for very, very long. Only about 4 years, but there's not a lot of trees like there are like up in Veneta area, like northwest Oklahoma. Or there's a lot of trees. There's just not those big hardwoods, where you can, or there's not much. The canopy is really big, so there's not a lot of undergrowth. Here the trees can be smaller, more bunches, a lot of post oaks, blackjacks, and they're bunched up together, and they don't get real good canopies, so everything is just super, super, super thick. Like, it's hard to walk. Some of these properties are really hard to walk through. So this property is like that. There's not really any good trees for a tree stand. Like there's like 2 I found that you could probably put a tree stand in, and that's like maybe I could throw my saddle up in it, but there's no way I could put a hang on in it. So that was automatically out. But there were some pine trees that this neighbor had planted that had, I guess, somehow pollinated into this over the last 20 years. And so I cut a pine tree in that I could climb into. But it was covered in ants. So I was like, well, that's out till we get a hard frost. Because I was actually, as I was up there cutting branches, I was getting bit by ants. And I was like, okay, I'm going to hunt this, but it can't be till after it freezes because I don't want to sit up here and have ants in my pants, legitimately. So I was like, I'm not going to do that. But there was one spot that was bedded, and it had 2 cedar groves on either side of it and a post oak flat right in the middle. And we're talking like 5 acres maybe. And around the post oak flat was just bedding area. It was just kind of not marshy, but just small grass, probably knee high, maybe a little higher, where they had just been bedding there. So I was thinking, because of the position of it, that they have, and there's also a pond like 100 yards behind them. So I'm like, they got food, water, and cover within 20 acres of each other, or within a 20-acre box, basically, that's surrounded by these cedars. And then you got this little post oak flat. So I put my blind on the edge, right off the road, legitimately. I could park within 80 yards, walk to a straight line to my blind over the post oaks. And the hunt went, I saw him on the trail cam, and I actually didn't hunt it for the first 4 days of season. I didn't want to get in there and spook him out, push him off. Not that he could have went a lot of places, but I didn't want to push him off for putting pressure on it. So I stayed out of there until the 4th day, and I actually went in there, and it wasn't an hour before sunset, and these does came in, and I had put my blind actually too close to their trail, so they came just roaring in on these post oaks, like within 10 to 15 feet of me. Scared the absolute piss out of me, and I was like, whoa, where'd you come from? But I was so close I couldn't do anything, and the wind was good, but deer have that sixth sense, and they were like, something ain't right. and I spooked them. I don't know if it's because I moved. I'm not really sure what I did. I moved a little bit, but they just bolted out of there. I was like, well, this place is done, at least for a hot minute. Like I was too close, and just it happens. So I was pretty frustrated, pretty irritated. And in the middle of my frustration and irritation, I actually grabbed my blind and moved it like 10 feet back. I was like, I might come back here in a week or two, whatever. I'm just going to move it back. So I moved it back. And that same evening, that buck showed back up. And I was like, that's weird. So the next day, he showed back up all throughout the day. And I was like, this is weird. The following day, so this is 3 days after 4 days into season, so the 7 days, we had a little bit of a cold snap come in. And the wind was going to come roaring from the south, which was weird because it was a cold snap, but the wind was coming from the south. And I could hunt this property. I was like, all right, I'm going to hunt it 3 days. We'll see what happens. First day, had deer all over it. Had 2 other bucks that were there. Nice looking deer, but not the one I was after. And I was like, cool. I backed off. They didn't know I was there. I watched them eat for a while. I actually had to stay there way after dark because they were eating so long on these acorns. I was like, I don't want to ruin this spot again. Like I kind of thought I already did. So I was like, I'm going to stay here. I stayed there till like 10 o'clock. And this is when the sun's going down at like 8 o'clock. So I was there for another 2 hours, just like in my blind, like, okay, this is not fun, waiting for them to push off. And finally they pushed off and I left. And I got home and my wife's like, well, you said you'd be home then. I was like, I know. I'm sorry. Like I had to wait. So the following day, I was like, I'm going to go hunt it again. Go hunt it again. I didn't see a single deer. And in conjunction of not seeing deer, the property just to the north of me, somebody was shooting all day or like all evening. I don't know if they were just plinking or sighting something, and I don't know, but they were plinking. And I was just like, this is turning into a really fun season. I got burnt, picked up a spot, got burned again, then got too close, then got burned again. Now I'm not seeing any deer. Now somebody's shooting like 200 yards from me. Just all I hear for 2 hours, just boom, 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 boom. And I'm like, this is turning into super much fun. So I go home to feed it. The following morning, I'm a mortgage lender at a local bank. We had a mortgage conference, and it was in the morning. Then we got the rest of the day off. So it's like 2 o'clock, and I'm like, well, I'm gonna go hunt. Weather's nice. I'm gonna go hunt. I'm gonna go sit in that blind again. And this deer had kept popping up early in the morning, like 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. He just kind of roamed through. And so I was like, he's still in the area. And it's not a big area. So I was like, I'm just bound to get him at one point. So that evening, I go and hunt, and a bunch of does come in again. And I think I told Greg this story because it's really funny. I thought it was funny. These does come in, and they're eating the acorns. And a spike comes in and pushes them off the acorns. It busts them up. Kind of like in the rut, just kind of busts them up. And this is all happening like 10, 15 feet in front of me, and I'm on the ground. The mama doe, I think it was the mama doe, the matriarch, comes back in and starts to beat the piss out of the spike. I mean, headbutting and kicking and headbutting. And I'm trying so hard not to laugh because I'm on the ground and this is 10, 15 feet in front of me, just making all kinds of noise. And I'm just trying not to laugh because it's hilarious. And all of a sudden I hear tink, 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 tink. And I'm like, that's antlers, because there was a grove of like old persimmon trees. So they're only like 6 feet tall, but just bunched up together. I was like, that's a buck. Its antlers are hitting the dried wood, tink, 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 as it's walking through. And there was another buck there that was a decent buck. And that's what I thought. I was like, it's him coming back, because I'd seen him a couple times. And the opposite direction of where I'm looking, or where I'm thinking that this sound's coming from, out of the cedar grove and this fig grove, he just steps out, goes whoop, and he's just right there. Like, I don't know, 9 feet, maybe 10 feet from me. I mean, I could spit on him. He's right there. And I'm like freaking out because he's so close and it's not where I expected him to come from. I thought the sound was coming up from over here, not on my right. So he walks right in front of me, and I waited till there was a cedar tree between me and him, and I pulled back. He took a step out. I sent the arrow. I saw it buried in the fletchings. I actually didn't think it went all the way through. It did, but I didn't think it did. And I mean, he took off like a bat out of hell, and I heard him crash 30, 40 yards. And I called my dad, freaked out, called Greg, freaked out, called my wife, freaked out, called everybody I knew was freaking out. Yeah, I'm not a good storyteller, but that's the gist of it.
That was awesome. Is that similar to some of the stuff that you're doing, Craig? Like that urban small parcel kind of game?
Yeah, I just think, the positive that you can take from his story is like, he sent me the screenshot of OnX of where he was hunting at, and he marked like 5 or 6 different spots. And I was like, we got to try to focus on one spot that you can get into and not push all these deer out of that small acreage. And I said, south wind is going to be your best wind, just because they're not going to smell you as you come into that property. And where he put that blind, there was a ton of rubs. I can't remember if they were from this season or their past season.
A lot of them were from this season. He
Yeah.
hit that thing hard. Actually, I don't know if I told you this. I went back a couple days later to look for my arrow, and where it passed through at, there was a small knoll, like just on his backside where I'd shot him, and it was just covered in cedars. I mean, it looked like you could have walked through it. Well, I managed to bury myself through it, and on the other side were those little fig tree things, and they were just destroyed. I mean, obliterated. Everywhere you looked, there were just rubs. But it was like this tiny little area surrounded by cedars, and I don't think if I would have pushed through there, never would have saw it. It blew my mind how much destruction was in a little tiny area of all these trees. Sorry.
You're good. But yeah, I think, just staying positive and, trying to just put some bait out just to see what's in there, because he told me, he's like, I think I'm going to go hunt public land. And, and then, as soon as that buck showed up, it just totally changed his outlook on that place.
Yes.
Well, and it's kind of making something out of nothing, because there's a lot of folks that probably have access to 10 acres in the back of grandma's yard that have never went and put a trail cam out and haven't even ever messed with it. They're like, oh, there's not many trees, there's not a ton of bedding back there. But what I'm learning, especially from the stories you've told me, and then this story, Ben, is these big bucks don't need a whole lot to be in a spot like that.
Well, and that's and I'm not speaking from like subject matter anyway, but that's a big misconception I think about whitetail. Is anybody that understands them from a biology standpoint, not a hunter standpoint, whitetail are some of the most adaptable. Actually, one of my professors, she called them today, rats with 4 legs, because they are one of the most adaptable species on Earth, and the way they adapt into society, people around people, is amazing. There's another 5 acres I picked up a couple weeks after this spot that I've been hunting, and it's between a highway and a neighborhood, and there's a green belt that runs underneath the highway and into the neighborhood. I've seen more bucks there than I've ever seen in western Oklahoma, where I have like 6,000 acres to hunt. I mean, it's because they work that green belt going back and forth, and that's how they travel through towns that way. And people should do it more. I mean, people should go door knock more and ask for permission in urban areas. It's a different style of hunting, but you will see some monsters, because and a lot of them too never get pressured. Gun season rolls around, like where I live, the deer's attitude changes dramatically. Or where I grew up in northeast Oklahoma, the deer's whole attitude changes like that. When it's rifle, we really tail into muzzleloader season, beginning of rifle season, it just changes. That doesn't happen in the city. They hear a car backfire 16 times a day, and they never get exposed to that rifle season pressure or that muzzleloader season pressure. It doesn't happen. People don't do it. It's illegal. And scent, that's a big one. I talk to guys with when they're asking me, like, how do I urban hunt? I'm like, you still have to worry about your scent, but not in the same degree you have to worry about it out in BFE, where they never smell that, or they only smell it from a very, very specific area. Out here, especially if it's around neighborhoods, the wind swirls, switches directions 5 times a week. They're always smelling people. They're always hearing noises that, like this spot, I brought my chainsaw out there and clear that day I took off work and cleared 2 trees on a 20-acre property. That evening, I had deer all over that corn. They didn't care. They're used to hearing those noises. So it's different, but it's very overlooked. Some places are better than others, though.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of those bucks can get to maturity too, which is what they lack in a lot of the places where people rifle hunt and muzzleloader hunt. Is a lot of those city bucks, some of them get killed. They're like 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. And you're like, that's pretty awesome. Not only for they have a long life and a cool history, and I'm sure a lot of people have seen them, but I also put on some big antlers when they're old like that.
Oldest deer ever killed, 21 years in Pennsylvania. It was right outside of Harrisonburg. It's still in the city limits. And it's the oldest whitetail to live, not in a like a zoo or something like that. And it was 20 years. So and that just proves your point, or what you just said just gives it 100% validity.
Yeah. So I know you said you were talking to your taxidermist. Have you got this deer scored at all? Because it looks like a huge buck, and it doesn't matter. But what
he said it was 164.
Jeez.
I don't know. I'm not great at scoring. I'm not even good at judging them really. I'm pretty sure he's 160 or higher because the one I killed last year that I did get scored was 150, and his antlers actually fit inside of this guy's. I can actually take them and fit them inside of him. So I'm pretty sure he's 160 plus. I don't think he'd go 170, 165, 167 is my guess, but my taxidermist said 164.
And do you know you said that one side kind of comes out? Do you know the width on him? Because he looks really framey. No.
Yes.
I'd like to see a score sheet on that deer because he's freaking cool. He's got a lot of character. How's your season been, Kreg? Have you got into him? Have you got to get out very much?
You shot a nice one.
Yeah, I got a pretty good one. I got an urban buck as well. So, just it's probably my second biggest buck ever. So, it's been a good season for me as well. So,
yeah, loving the urban game and passing on the savings. What are you gonna say, Ben?
Oh, just that one behind him on his right shoulder, I think. That's
which one? He's got like 3 or 4 big ones.
He's
got a lot of big ones.
Deer. He's a big frame. He's wide. I'll tell you another urban thing. That side, yeah, turkeys. Turkey hunting in urbans is a lot of fun too.
With a bow?
Yeah, that one, the one of them in my garage are all with my bow in city limits. Yeah, turkey. It's a little different because you can't really call. There's too much noise, but it's fun. It's a good time. I wouldn't recommend hunting anything else other than whitetail or turkeys, but I guess you could get away with it. But no, turkey hunt's a lot of fun too. Do you turkey hunt?
I do. More as a way to pass the time till the next deer season. But I'll shoot. Yeah, like I think the most turkey I ever shot in a year was 2. I shot one in Oklahoma, one in Texas one year. But I'll usually try to get one in Oklahoma. They're fun.
Oh, I love turkey hunting. I probably like it more than deer. I like it because you can call. You get that kind of call, bring them in, approach.
Mm-hmm.
I've never had any luck grunting or rattling in Oklahoma.
Yeah. Well, man, congrats on that buck. That is a sweet buck, and Kreg, congrats on your buck. I mean, that's awesome. Laying them down in the urban environment. You guys have got me halfway inspired to go freaking knock on somebody's door now. That's not my forte. I remember one duck hunting pond that I got in high school. I knocked on the lady's door and was like shaking, and then she's like, "Yeah, you can hunt, no problem." And I was like, "Oh, awesome."
I would tell all your listeners. So, since the beginning of season to now, I've acquired 4 other properties. 2 are 40 acres, a 5 acre, 20 acre, I guess 5, and another one's 30 acres. All the people listening, just be prepared to get no. A vast majority, then you get yes. But the people that give you yes, the way I've gauged I've kind of turned around how I talk to people. It's in urban areas you seem to get, and I've done this now in up in Guthrie too. Is it's usually liability, so it's a company that owns it or it's a family that owns it, and they don't want people hunting it because of liability. Get a lawyer to write you a liability waiver. I got a friend of mine to write me one. It's notarized. It's legal. It's Oklahoma state law binding. So that covers me there when they say liability. I hand them that piece of paper. And that has turned around a couple of conversations. They're like, oh, okay, cool, great. You're responsible. You've handed me this. Releases me from any liability. Awesome. That's the big one I get. 2, the other big one is people like, I like to watch the deer. I don't want to hurt the deer. That conversation to me is super easy because you just tell them, if you don't keep your population in check, they're going to end up dying. They're going to get disease. They're going to starve themselves out. They're going to get hit more by cars. And once you start saying that, it seems to be like a 182. They're like, oh, I never looked at it from that perspective. Now you can't get past when they say, oh, I already hunt it. Somebody else already hunts it. At least you can't get past that one. But Kreg gave me a genius idea, best idea I've ever heard for this. If you can't a lease, but you can afford the property tax, ask him to pay the property tax. I did that on one guy's. It was like $50 for the whole year. And he was like, yeah, sure. Cool. So that's my lease is paying his property tax. And I got that idea from Greg. That's a brilliant idea, in my opinion. Like, I never would have thought about saying that to somebody. It's brilliant. But the liability and just explaining to them.
It gives them a number that they already have in their head.
Yeah.
And I mean, sometimes it's only $300 or $400, and they're just like, man, you're going to pay that? That's awesome. I don't have to pay that. So it's just trying to figure out what makes sense to them. Because some people, you know, it's just not worth it, you know, so you got to figure out what's worth it for them.
It's brilliant, in my opinion. Like, that is a brilliant way to negotiate the conversation. And my job's all around money. So, like, segueing that into hunting, I was like, that's brilliant. And you can find out how much property tax is for anybody listening just by county record search at the assessors for the county. And so just tell them, and it does work. But
yeah, there we go. Well, Kreg, do you have any parting words of wisdom for people that have heard this and inspired to go urban hunt now on how to get permission or anything like that?
If you get discouraged, just keep looking. I mean, it's one of those things that people lose a buck to another bow hunter. You just got to find another buck and stay positive. I mean, it's easy to get the negative side of hunting. You know, people lose relationships. It's just the crazy side of things, and just always to stay positive with it. It's like, you know, if I hunted next to Ben and he shot the buck I had on camera, I would be the first one over there to high five him and take pictures for him, which I did offer to come all the way up there to take pictures because he was taking pictures on the hitch of his vehicle. And he was so excited that he didn't care what the pictures looked like. And I was like, yeah, but we have to complete the story by taking a good photo. And I think I annoyed him enough for him to go back out in the yard and took some better photos.
So kind of. What's funny about that?
Great,
what's funny is I got to Salise and there's a guy loading up a buck and he goes, damn, son. He was like, check picture of that yet? And I was like, wow, that's some weird timing because I just got off the phone with Kreg about bugging me about taking a picture. Can you take my picture?
I even told him, I said, I will drive up there after church tomorrow and take your picture. Like, it's worth it to me to complete the story, but I think he'll do better next time.
Probably.
Or he'll call me.
Probably. I got another one I've been chasing actually right now. I've stumbled upon him a couple days ago, and he's in that what I like to call the transition from like post rut to second rut, where he's just on food. And if he'll stay there another 2 days, maybe 3, I'll have another chance at him. He's not as big as that one, but he's close. It's another urban buck.
Heck yeah! Well, no, they're all not going to be mid 160s, so you can't be disappointed when a nice one comes in. So
no.
Well, Ben, Kreg, I appreciate you guys coming on and talking about this and telling your story and then kind of how you guys met. But for folks that are listening to the podcast and enjoyed this and want to keep up with your hunting season and see when you guys are shooting more big bucks, where can they find you guys on social media? Ben, go first, and then you can go second.
I only have a Facebook. I don't do
Facebook.
Yeah. So
Ben, is it just Ben Reed on Facebook?
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Sounds good. What about you?
You can find me Kreg Griffith with Oklahoma Bow Hunter. I run a social media page for bow hunters. Just type in Oklahoma Bow Hunter on Instagram or Facebook. You know, a lot of people send in photos, and we just try to share your story.
Heck yeah.